Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, what we're doing is we're doing a read-along of a book of creation, a fantasy adventure by Gregory James Gardner Jr. That's me. I wrote this a couple years ago, and so far we're into chapter 10, so you should check out chapter 1 first, and then we'll see you when you get back to here. Now to recap, in chapter 8, The Heart of All Things, we basically saw the creation of time and space, and in chapter 9 we were introduced to this little newt that created the Garden of Creation, or Garden of Eternity, pardon me. And so now we're going into chapter 10. We are in the halls of Heliautmun. The year is 1065 by the nocturnal calendar. Talia eyes watered. That was beautiful. Azra certainly has his talent, Mathis said. Come. Ganon skulked away as the two appreciated the work of art before their eyes. There's much more. Mathis trotted back a bit. Speaking of more, he turned to run. More berries! I'll catch up! Ganon backed out of the recess and continued down the hallway. Talia followed behind. Like a child in a museum for the first time, she looked closely at the walls while she made her way through. But when she came to the next room, her jaw dropped. The circular room shot upwards 5 stories. It was filled with sculptures and more frescoes, and even more paintings, carvings, hieroglyphs, texts, calligrams, and scrolls. Dominating the room, rising from the center, seemingly grown as any other tree might be, sat a red crystal monolith of such proportion that it jutted out of the domed ceiling's oculus to greet the light high above them. It sat covered in the design of a tree, as the others that Talia had glimpsed before, but this tree was far more detailed, far more cared for, far more... Is that a real crystal tree? An arbalisk, the serpent answered nonchalantly as he passed. But more importantly, this chamber holds a portion of the story of my world, enough of it that I no longer hold Azra responsible for many things, though I still hold him in contempt. Why do you still hate him? Talia asked. I would not be here in this state had he just left well enough alone. The sound of Mathis's steps echoed ahead of him as he scurried up with an armful of branches and berries. As he offered them to Talia, she politely declined. Forgetting himself, he offered them to Ganon, who just glowered down at him. Well enough alone? She asked. His interference in the Superior's plan. All he had to do was follow orders, but he couldn't, and now, this. What makes him so dangerous? He's brilliant, and a rogue, and the combination makes him unpredictable, he paused. Set him free, and there's no telling what he'll do. Though, I have read through this entire chamber time and time again, and I have no doubt that his intentions were well meant, but Talia, his methods border on madness. What has he done? She asked. It seemed he attacked several places to gather what he needed to create this world, he said with disdain. We pursued him for years, and every time he showed up, people died in droves. I see. No, you don't, he hissed. Our people don't simply die. Ganon stormed over to another portion of the wall. He waved his bulk for Talia to come over and look at the carvings there. Yes, our people can die, but not in the manner that your people perish. The infliction of such death as followed Azra around our world was horrific. Why is he doing it? Read this panel first, he urged. Know of our transcendent nature, for I believe that because you carry my markings, you may also have inherited the birthright, and it may answer some questions. The panel extended from the floor to the first tier above, and stood flanked by statues that emerged from the panel's images, yet the statues were one with the image as a whole. A depiction that looked like a myriad of random things became clearer and clearer the longer she gazed. What she read began to play out right before her eyes as Ganon and Mathis watched her hypnotically swoon. On the left sat 3 statues of average-looking people. All of them looked inward at the fresco on the wall. The fresco itself showed these same people, one being kind, another being ambivalent, and the last being cruel. As the scene swept from left to right, All manner of acts played out, and with each act, the visage of two of the people changed. The kind person began to look more confident, refined, and proud, strengthened in all respect. The ambivalent person stayed the same, and did not change in any stature at all. The cruel person began to look sickly, diminished, and lost their limbs. The scene culminated on the right with 3 more statues that resembled detailed versions of the final visages that the people bore on the fresco. The kind person stood tall as a man-like feathered dragon. On the mandrake's chest was emblazoned Sepsu. The ambivalent one stood in the middle, but still looked the same as he had been before. On the chest was a smooth place that remained nameless. Finally, the cruel one sat coiled and intertwined through the feet of the other 2. On its chest, running down its scaled belly, was the word Saharu. Talia came to. In a slight daze, she looked around, breathing deeply. What? Easy there, maiden. Mathis stepped up to steady her. I saw... She paused. I know, Mathis said. I've seen it a couple times myself, trying to make sense of things. I do not understand. Talia looked again. How is it that you have diminished? The serpent inhaled deeply before he answered. My blind servitude to the superiors, mostly. All the fear I instilled in others throughout my life has helped to create this image you see before you. He looked to Mathis and, for the first time, became sibilant as he spoke. Then his meddling sealed my fate. Mathis? Talia turned to the old man. What did you do? Ashamed, Mathis shrank away. I may have switched things around when I told you about finding the crystal. Talia's eyebrow raised. I met Ganon quite a while back. We went to the tower of Heliautmun together. He was the one that recovered the necklace, and when he was not aware, I snuck into his camp and I stole it to study it at the Northern Temple. And the girl saw you do it, growled Ganon. I had no idea she was there, Mathis pleaded as he stumbled back from Ganon. I didn't know I was being followed over the approach. I truly am sorry. That's far more than just switching things around, the Azek snapped with a burning glare. Ganon turned back to Talia. Daughter, his voice softened. Take heed where matters of morality are concerned. I'm still angry about things, but this old man's motives have brought us together. Talia's expression eased up as she turned and nodded. This has something to do with Azra's motivations, then? Everything to do with his motivations, he answered. The people of our world have been blinded to our true potential while under the rule of the superiors. I was blinded as well, and Azra seeks to show them all the truth. Talia looked back to the panel and examined it once more. Is that all? No, Mathis and Ganon answered simultaneously and exchanged glances. What more do you know, old man? Ganon asked. What I know could fill a book, Mathis stated plainly. Several of them, actually. I'll settle right now to say that the fate of all creation hinges on whether or not Azra is successful. Sounding dramatic again, old friend. It's the truth, Ganon begrudgingly admitted. The superiors gained power over my world because they saw the Garden of Eternity. Khan's garden? Talia asked. One and the same, Mathis answered. In the silence of the moment, Mathis turned to the serpent and spoke in a hushed tone, not to disturb Talia as she thought about things. Ganon, I took the crystal, and for that I'm sorry. But my hope is, now that you have it, you can reunite it with the toast crystal and regain your former gifts. You have absolutely no idea what you're talking about, the serpent responded firmly as Talia snapped out of her thoughts to pay attention. The key you stole is for a power core to the Dark Star armor, and, as I have already pointed out, I no longer have the markings to pilot it. Armor? Talia asked. Yes, Dark Star is a set of armor, yet it is its own being at the same time. But it requires the higher functions of a pilot to fully operate, and again, I can no longer pilot the armor. But what about me? Talia asked. I have the markings. Ganon rumbled with an inward growl. I cannot do that to you, not to anyone. You do not want to become one with Darkstar. Once it has a hold of you, and once it takes over, you might as well be dead. All it needs is what's inside of your skull, and when it has that, it will not let go without a fight. Only with a great ordeal and painful anguish was I able to free myself from that cursed thing. Why would you even suggest it? Do you think it'll help you freeing Azra? Will it? It might, he answered, but I have no idea of how things have progressed on the world in my absence. The armor may simply be outmatched by more advanced technology you may face. He looked her in the eyes. You have no idea what you're going to face should you choose to continue with this. The other world is nothing like your own, and going over there is no guarantee that you will be able to return here, of which I am the perfect example. Where is Darkstar now? Talia pressed. In the forest below Kural. That's over half a week's trek there and back at least, Mathis raised 3 fingers. We have 3 days. There is more, Ganon added. The power core is at the ruined tower looming on the north face of Muru Aga. The Pharaohs of Argaria? Mathis interjected. There's no way to get both and back here in time. Talia turned to Mathis and placed a hand on his shoulder. Do what you can to get the gateway open by the time we get back with Darkstar. Ganon looked at Talia as she said we. But the distance, maiden, Mathis cautioned. It can be done, she said. So have the gate ready when we return. Ganon squinted. Pardon me, maiden, but it's you who needs to be back with Darkstar by the time the gateway's open. It's connected to the light of Sar, and there's no keeping the gate open once the light is gone. It will be some months before we can open it again. Ganon, you should come with me, she said as though he had a choice. She placed her hand against his scales, and the two simply vanished. Though they were gone, Mathis looked at where they had been standing because it seemed that they had not completely left. The air suddenly became oppressive as a swirl of wind rushed up into the chamber to knock Mathis down. Still, he kept his eyes locked on the shifting forms at the center of the chamber. There was a gleam of light that flashed in what might have been Ganon's hands, if he had any. The winds became intense, and in another few shifting moments, a massive hulking thing sat amid the group. In a loud snap, all was calm and quiet. Talia fell to the floor as Mathis rushed up to where they were. She lay face down on the ground, while Ganon stood in a dazed, confused, and of no use. As Mathis moved in, Darkstar moved and locked its stare right on him as it started to stand. His heart froze, but quickly he grabbed Talia and dragged her away. Darkstar stopped as Mathis increased his distance, and it sat back down in place. Sure that it was safe now, the old man knelt down to Talia and turned her over to see her eyes wander around the room. Talia? Mathis flinched as Ganon fell to the ground next to them. The glowing sphere rolled out of Ganon's hand and away to stop with a clink at Darkstar's foot as it silently loomed overhead. Mathis's dread turned to panic as he looked back to Talia. He smacked her cheeks. Talia, are you all right? Say something! Talia's eyes fixed on Mathis as she struggled to speak, and she managed to ask one thing. Is it safe to go near? But Mathis had no idea what to say as she slipped into unconsciousness. Alright, thank you for joining us for Chapter 10. We'll see you guys next time.